Here we are, Emunah B'tachon and Faith and Trust, chapter 5. Now, the truth is, he doesn't finish chapter 5. We'll get a large amount of it, but he dies in the middle of this chapter, the chapter on prophecy, actually. This one we're doing right now, the non-logical thinking and intellect, he does finish, but like I said, this is the part of the book where we're going to get to the end, we're going to get exciting, and then it's over. Okay, so here we go. The first hour on page 210. I don't know if we'll get there tonight, but just telling you, we have one or two classes left of this. Non-logical thinking bows his head before wealth and sometimes before the wealthy, bows down before power and sometimes before the powerful, bows down before beauty, before loveliness, before fine buildings, royal palaces, great action, new inventions. It makes an alliance with the eye and walks hand in hand with the present. Its adversary, the intellect, loves the intellectual side of reality, favors the scales, covets the laws of mathematics and reasoning, and is drawn to the rules of research. It is the nature of man to love competition. If there are two people, one competes with the other. If there are two communities, what community competes with the other? Or if early generations compete with later generations, this too is alluring, producing a clash that is pleasurable to follow. Now, the earlier generations claim we are cleverer than you. The generations are deteriorating with the flow of time. The heart of the early generations was open wide like the entrance to a palace, and the heart of the later generations is like the eye of a needle, to which the later generations will retort, albeit in a veiled way. But the early generations were idlers. They had no contact with other nations, and the people in the various parts of the world did not know one another. All their food was natural, and they dressed in sheepskins. They fought their wars with swords and spears, bows and arrows and catapults. But we have put down railroad tracks all over the world, and we have created the telegraph and the telephone and the radio. We have made all mankind into one family. All the scholars of the world confer together. The world is one big city to us. We have even made towers that fly through the air, and we are lighter in flight than eagles. We have also built many factories that produce various goods such as our forefathers never imagined. We have also invented weapons, world-destroying bombs that can kill thousands and tens of thousands. It is below our dignity to compete with the earlier generations that lacked all these things. What a giant want to compete with a dwarf. So you have two sides of that fight. One is that we know better than you. We have the older generations were closer to the event, whatever the case is going to be. We are more open to learning things than you. The later generation says, look at all our advancements. And if you think about it, the case is true. Today, what do we say? Due to our internet, Google search, and or SGs, for the real old timers in the classrooms. But so that is what people say, we have a much better system. And yet others, and the lady isn't here, but she would argue, no, we've lost out because we no longer know how to do research on our own. Going from one thing to another, we just know how to Google something or whatever the search engine is going to be. So that is that's the major argument that goes on between the two generations if we wanted to compete. And that's how we do compete. And the truth is, I don't know who's right. The older generation who had more time to think because they didn't have all these stimuli going into them every single second of the day, or us, because we have so much information that we have the ability to traverse much more than they ever did. Think about it. You can learn Shas, and it doesn't take 7 years anymore. It takes with this computer, you can listen to class all day long.
Well,
it's recorded. You got it made, and then you have explanation upon explanation. You have on every single class, you have 5 or 7 different classes that you can download, and you just keep going with it. So it's interesting how much what is considered better, what is not, and that's the argument you would have. Yeah, what do you want to say? Well, what?
I think it was the physicist David Brin who became a science fiction writer. He was postulating a world in 1990, 30, 40 years hence. And he talked about the net.
Right.
And that trying to get a piece of information was like trying to get a drink from a fire hose. And to some extent, you have the world's collected information and wisdom at your fingertips. You still have to know how to find things.
Right.
You still have to be able to discriminate between absolute garbage and something that's useful.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
It's like comparing sources. How much of it is somebody's opinion and how much is scholarly research?
But there'll be anything. In other words, if I have a book in front of me, I have to make a decision on whether that book is based upon something real or not. I mean, you have Dianetics, which was a foolishness.
Do you know the story behind that?
He's not alive, right?
He's dead.
Right. He was a science fiction writer, a failing science fiction writer, and then it caught on.
Do you know how that came about?
Mm-hmm.
He and 3 other writers talked about placing a bet about who could invent a successful religion.
Okay.
And one of those was Robert Heinlein, and he bowed out of the bet.
Okay.
But L. Ron Hubbard won because he invented this thing that it's not even really a religion, but it caught on and developed tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of adherents.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all done on a bet.
No, it reminds me of there's a movie like that with Eddie Murphy, where he was a bum. They made him into
Trading Places.
There you go, Trading Places. Same thing, the dollar bet.
Right.
Okay. But I'm just saying, with all that, that's food for what we're saying, that you have a lot of information out there, sometimes too much, and we don't know how to analyze the information because we just read this stuff. But if we're so inclined, we maybe just even listen to it, and we wait for. I mean, I always go back to my favorite example, where the president will give a State of the Union address, and then because we're too stupid to understand what the president said, we have to be told what the president said by the pundits. And you listen to what they're saying, and you think, I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that from the president. How did they come up with that? And and then it goes further. Then we have to listen to our news media tell us again what they believe the president said, because we're too stupid to understand English these days. And that's going for every president. That's not just this president. That's every president. I've watched that analysis over and over and thinking, you guys, it's not Rashi here. This is not brilliant speech. It's simple stuff out there.
It's a relatively recent innovation in American history.
I don't know what you call it recent, but ever since I've been watching, I've watched a couple of years already. So it's, again, this is not the first president I've watched. This is, I remember all the way back to Carter, they were doing it, and probably before him. But anyway, I'm just saying that's what it is. With all the information, we don't know how to discern what's correct and what's not correct. And that may be a problem with this, what's his name? The guy
who invented a religion?
No, that's all I know. The one who said that we have, is taking a drink from the net is
David Brin.
David Brin. So he had a point. Sometimes you're just going to you have too much. Okay, so here, we're on 214. The non-logical thinker listened seriously and intently to those 2 debaters, and in keeping with his way to judge on the spot, he writes and signs his verdict. You earlier generations, go and rest in peace with your collected wisdom. We are living in a generation of industry, a young and sophisticated one. But the intellect judges, sits and studies, and using deep reasoning, it determines the wisdom's importance and determines that wisdom's importance lies in this theoretical study, and neither side shall place its many practical applications on the scale. The height of wisdom is abstract wisdom, and the fact that people use it in order to better their material life does not add honor or elevation to the wise soul that dwells in the heavens. True, the later generations have made use of wisdom in the service of mankind and have enriched the world greatly, but that is not a reason to belittle the previous generations, which gave themselves over completely to the acquisition of wisdom and understanding, without intending to use their wisdom to invent new inventions on this earth. Moreover, they intentionally refrained from doing this, for they feared that these things might fall into the hands of disreputable people, who might use them for various idolatrous purposes and for bloodshed. It was said in the Gemara Yuma about the Garmu and the Avitinus families. The Garmu family possessed the art of baking the lechem upon the showbread, which was placed on the special table in the temple, and they guarded the secret of baking this special bread zealously. The Avtinas family knew the secret of adding a special grass that would cause the smoke of the burning incense to rise straight up. Both families explained their refusal to reveal their secrets in the same way, that the temple will be destroyed in the future. They feared that their special knowledge would find its way into undeserving hands and be used for idolatrous purposes. Besides, it is natural for human beings not only to invent many things, but to forget much as well. We have no idea how much has been forgotten, as Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon said in Kohelet. It can happen that they will say of something, "Look, it's new Coke," but it has already existed in the past. Okay?
That probably did not exist in the past.
No, but Coke did.
Not new Coke.
Actually, new Coke was vanilla Coke. That's what they said. That new Coke wasn't new Coke. It was really vanilla Coke, which didn't sell. So they made it new Coke. And then they went into classic Coke, because they want to call it old Coke. But the point is that many times we look at something and they say, "Oh, look, a brand new thing," which is really just a rehash. By the way, if you look at Hollywood, they are constantly rehashing and calling it new and improved. It's really horrible what they've done, but there's, as my mother said many years ago, there's not an original idea left in all of Hollywood. But that would be an example of, look, it's brand new when it's not.
Some friends of mine had a commercial art studio in Chicago, and they had a little bit of doggerel on the bulletin board. I don't recall all of it.
What's a doggerel?
Just a little bit of verse.
Huh?
And I don't recall the whole thing, but it ended with, "Why strain your eyes, plague your eyes."
Okay. There you go. There is no memory of former generations, nor of the future ones that are to follow, among those that will come after them. Now, see, it just goes to show that nothing's changed. As we always say, we all have that Americans have a very short memory. And it's true. We all, but it's not just Americans, it's all people. We have a short memory. If it doesn't apply to us right then and there, we're not really interested in torturing ourselves about it.
Isn't that in Koheles? There's nothing new under heaven?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Repeat the same things and expect different results.
That's what we call insanity. But that's the definition. But that's exactly what it is. We have short memories, so that's why history repeats itself. That's why, as you were talking about before, the KKK could march through the streets of South Bend. That's why the avid anti-Semitism can be showing its ugly face again only 60 years later. That's why everything happens. That's because we have a very short memory. And we always want to think, it can't happen again. But when it can, not just us, against everybody. Again, people have very short memories.
You know the expression, I can't remember who the quote's from, mind's blanking out, but it was those who do not study history are doomed to repeat it.
Yeah.
Santayana.
Santayana. And there was a not recent, but within the past decade, there was a cartoon, those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it, and those of us who do study history are doomed to have to watch it.
That is true. It's true. We know the wisdom of the Egyptians, whose mummies have remained intact until present times. The scientists of the past few generations have not been unable to ravel the secret. It is said the embalming of Yaakov in Egypt, 40 days passed, for such is the time of the embalmed. We see from this that it was a lengthy process, involving a complicated procedure and necessitating various chemical substances to be used in turn. In Africa and in Rome, one can also see beautiful buildings, evidence of hidden treasures of wisdom and knowledge. The wisdom of the later generations is based on that of the former ones, who discovered the carbon dioxide and the oxygen in the air, and the uses of their separation from each other, studied ores found in the depths of the earth, namely gold, silver, iron, and the methods of their extraction. On the basis of development of this wisdom, the later generations conducted many experiments. Much of the glory should go to the ones who first opened the doors of wisdom. They were not handed the keys by the previous generation, but rather used their hearts and their great talents to unlock those gates of knowledge. The later generations, in contrast, entered gates that were already open. Moreover, most of the new inventions were invented following experiments conducted by ordinary people possessing energy and a talent for experimenting, without their having acquired wisdom in the institutions of higher learning of their times. So once again, you're seeing that he could be picking on many different things. One is, there's a concept, we've said many times, is that in Judaism we believe that from Sinai, from that moment of Sinai, when God revealed the Torah to us, all 2 to 3 million people who were standing in Sinai, we all saw the revelation. We had a tremendous connection with God at that particular point. We all knew the Torah. We were called the Dor HaDeah, the generation of knowledge, of very insightful knowledge. We had the whole Torah at our fingertips. We were living a godly life protected by the clouds of glory, given man every single day, the bread from heaven, the what do you call it, the quail. Everything was idyllic, great. We're in the desert walking around, but we had everything we could expect. We were living literally by in God's glory. Then what happens? We move away from that, and we go ultimately into real life, get into Israel, and so on and so forth. Well, each generation is removed from that original generation, who knew it all, who experienced it, who were the forerunners of everything that we do today. And so we always want to show respect to that generation and anybody before our generation, because they are the ones who gave us this Masara, this tradition, and everything with it. So we have to respect them. Well, what happens is, no, because of our tremendous advancements in English and so on and so forth, we think that we know, because we study more, we have the ability to study more, or whatever the case is going to be, we believe that we know more than they did. And we no longer, that's what he's afraid of, we're no longer respecting that tradition. And that's why we want to say, if they would have been alive today, they would have said this. They would have realized that what they said was wrong. And he's arguing, you can't say that. They were the ones, you're sitting, to use the,
standing on the shoulders of...
Yeah, I think that's a conservative one, where we say we're sitting on the shoulders of giants, but we don't realize that sometimes. But we are. They were giants. They understood all these things, and they weren't. And when they would say, and because we like to be literalists, we misunderstand what they're talking about many times. We miss you miss the forest of the trees, because we don't understand. They're talking in one way, and we assume that that's what they meant. No, it doesn't always mean that way. When they said that, when they seem to be ruling by spontaneous generation, it wasn't. They were just using they were using the language of that day. It wasn't really what they were. There's no proof one way or another that's all they really believed. They were putting Torah principles into that. That's all. And I think that's what people get confused at when they start reading all these different Talmudic statements. That they don't want to. They just want to leave it in the literal state, but at the same time, they would, God forbid, want us to leave their words in a literal state. So it's a double standard they want to employ. But I think that's what he's yelling so much at this point. He says, now here and there, we find amazing procedures mentioned in the writings of previous generations. In the Yam Shel Shlomo and Yevamot, I found in the Even Israel, these are all different books, by Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Yoel Halevi, the story of a delicate operation performed in Babylonia by a doctor named Rav Sheshet. One of the more famous operations in the Gemara is the cesarean section, including ensuring the mother a full recovery and allowing her again to become pregnant and bear more children. The Rambam Maimonides, in his commentary on the Mishnah, discusses whether a child born by cesarean section or one born after are considered the firstborns in terms of their rights, wrote, and what is said that a woman can live after her side is tore open and even can become pregnant and have another baby, I cannot understand, and this is a very strange matter. But the Gemara in Bechoros discusses the status of a child born after a cesarean. Is he considered firstborn? And says the second as to receiving the inheritance of the firstborn. No, he is not to receive the inheritance, firstborn's inheritance, for it has to be a firstborn, and it doesn't matter if it comes the normal way or in this case cesarean. But in our time, cesarean sections are quite common, and the mother recovers fully and can become pregnant again and give birth. It is not impossible that in the time of the Mishnah there were doctors who were experts in this operation as well. So it's not impossible that in the time of the Mishnah that there were doctors who were experts in this. We see that they were able to perform surgical operations, as it says in Sanhedrin. The Rav Todos, the doctor, said, no cow and no sow, leave Alexandria unless their womb is removed. From this, we see that they were such experts in this operation that it was a regular custom of theirs to operate on those animals, on all of those animals that were being exported from the city. This was done as a measure of economic protection, so that the neighboring countries would remain dependent on them for their meat supply. They were afraid that other countries would breed these animals, and they would therefore lose their source of income, so they made sure to perform a hysterectomy on all cows and sows before being exported alive. But when you're seeing this, by the way, this business model, it's interesting, with the world, or with the OPEC, with the world oil right now, because they're calling on OPEC to cut production, because
to raise the prices.
Right, to raise prices, because there's a lot of oil out there right now, and they're saying that the barrel it's already below $80, it's $76. They're saying it can fall as much as $60 to $60 a barrel, and if that happens, it's going to take away all their wonderful profits. But it's going to start crashing the market, and so they're saying that OPEC has to pull back. And I'm thinking, wow, it's such an interesting thing. You want to keep it at a $3 level.
They do.
Yeah, and they don't want to come down because they want to argue that you're going to destroy the economy. And but that's all part of this, where you have these countries who are trying to figure out the market, like they were, and they said, so we have to either stop if we allow you to have our stuff, namely have the animals and they can reproduce, so then you won't need us anymore. The export-import business. So we have to make in such a way that we can sell you something, but it has to be that it can replicate, which is an amazing thing. Yeah.
With the genetically modified grains, one of the important things that they do in the development is to make the grain so it can't reproduce.
Oh, there
You
you
know, so the
Hybrids.
hybrid,
go. Right.
you only get one crop and then you gotta buy more seeds.
There you go. That's what it is. Yeah, it's just
Very clever.
Yeah, it's from the Gemara. They were also adept at removing the spleens of human beings. Procedure known to make the body lighter of movement, as it says in Avodah Zarah, regarding the verse, and 50-footmen running in front of him, Adoniyahu, the son of David HaMelech, who surrounded himself with trappings of royalty. That all of them had their spleens removed and their foot soles operated on. Rashi explains further, the spleen makes one feel heavy, and therefore they had their spleens removed. As to the soles, the flesh was removed from them, so that they couldn't feel the thorns. It's clear that this too was a very complex operation, and they had medicines that could heal the bones and harden them. But without that, such an operation would have ruined the bones and impeded easy and free movement. So again, what he's showing is that in the Talmud you have these experiments, you have these people saying they can do this, no reason not to take them seriously. So to say that they didn't know what we know today is foolish. They knew things. We don't know how to, even the Rambam didn't know how to explain it, but today it becomes common practice, yeah.
That particular one,
You don't like it?
I don't like that at all. Medically, that's nonsense.
I don't know, they were doing something. So,
But medically, it's nonsense because they're interpreting a verse.
I mean, what's the verse?
The verse, 50 footmen running in front of him.
Right.
But Avodah Zarah talks about how that happened, but who really knows that? And Rashi saying the spleen makes one feel heavy, and therefore they had their spleens removed.
Because that's Masorah, that's the point. That's the oral tradition we have. That's how we know that they did that. You're asking on the old tradition, so that goes back to the original.
Okay, I think there was some serious misinterpretation there. But because, yeah. You know,
Why you can't live without a spleen?
you can live without a spleen, but you're more prone to infections.
I don't think they're worried about that.
And removing flesh from the soles.
Making it harder.
Yeah,
It says you're making it harder.
if you wander around barefoot, you build up calluses, thicker soles.
Okay, so they had apparently medicines that could
But
heal bones and stuff.
to actually remove it, I don't know.
I don't know if it's a fair thing to say it. No, you can't say that.
I don't see how that's possible, and I know a great deal about medicine.
Also, again, you know what? You're the one with the Rambam who said, I don't know what they're talking about. When he was talking about the cesareans and having babies again, in his time, it was impossible. And yet, today again, we know it is. But in the Mishnah talks about it. So it could be that people knew at one time, and then they forgot because of the Dark Age, whatever the case is going to be, and then it was rediscovered. It was not an impossibility. I mean, can we build a pyramid today?
Yeah, we could.
Not the way they did.
Not the way they did, but
And we can't replicate what they're doing on anything. We don't even know how they did it. We look at it and say, how did they do this? It doesn't make any sense. Because we can't understand it. But it's there, so we can't argue it. So all I'm suggesting is that I hear what you're saying, and I don't know how it is because I'm not a doctor. I'm taking the Chazon Ish's word, I'm taking Rashi's word, and the ultimate the Gemara, that that's what they did. And I don't really have a problem with it. It's just amazing. And all it's proving is that they had knowledge that sometimes we forgot or rediscovered. And then, like I said, he said before, that's what people think it's new. So, yeah.
Like some of the stones in the Western Wall are so large
Right.
and so perfectly cut that it's mystery, how those
Right.
were moved.
So you have all these things that we have to try to figure out what it is.
Laser cutters.
Laser cut.
Hey,
Okay, we'll stop there.